When things don't go according to plan, I believe we should remind ourselves what Seneca tells us to remind ourselves, and that is God had a better idea. Now, whether you believe in God or not, I don't think matters for this video because I think if you can just remind yourself something had a better plan, because I think whether you believe in God or you don't, I think you can agree that so often we get what we need, not what we want. And whatever is in charge of that is the thing that had a better idea. We thought this was the best. We weighed all the options and we came to the conclusion that this is the way it should go. And we start taking actions to obtain that outcome. And either something happens which we didn't foresee, or the thing which we did foresee but chose to try to avoid happens. Just remind yourself, God had a better idea. Something with foresight, something that knows that what you want isn't always what you actually want, made the decision instead of you. And is that not the person you would want making the decisions? Is that not what you would want to happen? And that's, obviously what I mean by, when we say things happen that we need, not what we want. God knows best. And as I said, if you don't believe in God, that doesn't mean you don't understand that so often we get what we need, not what we want. And these situations become so much easier to bear when you remind yourself how this may age in such a way where you'll be so thankful what you wanted didn't happen. How you'll be able to look back upon it as one of the best times in your life, as one of the best things that ever happened to you. Now, I've spoken on this plenty of times, but I believe so often it's one little thing makes the big change to understanding to yeah, makes the big change. And I think a lot of times, at least in my life, I can look back to one moment where it's like, yeah, right there, just something changed. I kind of already knew it. I kind of already had a feeling that was the direction I was going to go. But then, I heard that, or I did that, or I experienced that. And then it was just 180, on a dime. And to me, this saying is one of those things. I always preach, want what happens to happen, no greater harmony. And, Marcus Aurelius preaches this as well. And I always preach how we so often get what we need, not what we want. But I recently read Seneca say, God had a better idea. And it was one of those moments where, you know, something changed. And I thought, wow, that's such a beautiful way to put it. Such a beautiful way to put it. And I was so fortunate to be able to put this to the test so, so soon in my hearing the quote. And I was in Venice, and I excuse me, I had a flight to Paris. So I'm on my way to the bus to start heading to the airport. And I just happened to look at my phone, and I got a notification or I got an email saying that my flight's been canceled. So I'm thinking, that's, you know, weird. So obviously inspect, and yeah, my flight got canceled. And, I was supposed to be meeting my mother in Paris. So it was, she was going to be there tomorrow. So obviously didn't want it to be such a affair where I got there in a couple days. I wanted to be there ASAP. So I go to the airport and have to sit in a 4-hour line of people who are dealing with the same exact thing that I am, because it was probably a pretty full flight. And I remember just sitting there in line, stressed about, when's the next flight I'm going to be able to take? Where am I going to rest my head tonight? I have no lodging here. What am I going to do? What's my mom going to do? She's, going to be in Paris alone. Um, and, it's just, what am I going to do? And I, I remembered God had a better idea. And, looking back, I can confirm that he did, because I played my whole trip by ear, so I had no accommodation booked that night anyways, and I was going to land in Paris around midnight and have to find a hotel somewhere or a hostel. And I ended up getting a free hotel from the airport because of the inconvenience. So I got a free hotel out of it. I got a voucher for free food. I ended up getting the 6 a.m. flight. So my flight was only, 8 hours later. And I ended up getting to the airport at the same time as my mom. So we were able to go do the whole travel together instead of separate. And, in the moment, obviously I didn't think, oh, this is so great. I wasn't able to connect those dots. I wasn't able to see how this was all going to work out for the best. But I sat there and I said, so many times, so often in my life, I've gotten what I needed, not what I wanted. Who's to say that this is not that again? Who's to say that God didn't have a better idea? Who's to say that this all isn't going to work out for the best? And why would I spend 4 hours sitting in this line, whining, complaining, worrying about what's going to happen, and just be present, enjoy it, do something productive, or just be present and live in the moment? That is what I ended up doing. I just sat there. I didn't go on my phone. I didn't do anything other than sat there and just was present, borderline meditating, with no worry, with no concern whatsoever, strictly due to the fact that I believe that God had a better plan than I. And in the end, who's to say he didn't? The only negative out of the whole thing was that I ended up getting like 2 hours of sleep. But I mean, um, there is reasons why that may have actually 2 hours of sleep may have actually benefited my trip, due to getting rest at a time and place when I wouldn't have wanted rest and probably would have been frustrated. But the need for rest allowed me to rest and probably make for a more enjoyable experience. And yeah, I just think it's a beautiful way to put it, that God had a better idea, that God knows best. And this is just one of those scenarios where you need to remind yourself of that. Trust that when you connect the dots in the future, you're going to see how this random dot aligns so perfectly in the grand scheme of life. And you wouldn't, even if you could will it another way, you wouldn't. Not even if it was, oh, what I wanted versus this. Okay, I guess I'd go with that. More of a, I could change this in any way I want. Anything can happen. And you'll say, No, it happened perfectly. I couldn't even plan it any better, you know? Even with my hindsight, even with the foresight, I cannot plan it any better than what had happened in that present moment. And I think that can give us hope. That can give us hope in the will of whatever is willing all of this. And to trust that even though I don't understand why this is happening, even though this feels like it's happening for the worst, I've been shown time and time again that that is false. And this is actually happening for the best of reasons. So just remember, God had a better idea, and he always does.